Very excited today. We have not only one, nor two, but three very special guests with us. They will be speaking on the topic of some of the mistakes that maybe they've encountered, mistakes that maybe they've made, and then turning that into some of the lessons they've learned and they carried on throughout their career in their organization and the experiences that they've learned as well. This is a panel on vulnerability, right? So I am going to encourage you all to be vulnerable. When the time comes, please ask them questions. Please raise your voice, be vulnerable with us. I'm sure they'll have questions for each other as well. And then, without further ado, I'm going to introduce all of us. First of all, my name is Elaine Chen. I am a client success manager here at Degree. I've been with Degree for about 3 years now, and just taking along the ride, right? I'm so excited to be here at Lens. Right next to me, we have Marsha Parker from Ford Motor Company. Woo! She's the Director of Learning, Design, and Emerging Technologies, and her passion, very, very cool, is on human-centric design approach to learning technologies and ecosystems. We'll hear more about that. Next, we have Emily Wagoner from Code 42. She's a yes, she's a people development manager at Code 42, and her focus is on creating learning platform programs that are key to business success. Last but not least, Dave Harverson from Medtronic. There we go, the old crew. He's a technology adoption consultant, and his belief is that online learning designers should think and act like web designers and developers. Right? Very intriguing. But more on that later on. I'm going to kick it off to Marsha as she starts with her presentation use case. We're going to have a quick Q&A after each presentation before the following one. And then right at the end, we're going to come back all together and have a general Q&A and conversation. Marsha, you have the floor. Over to you.
Thank you, Emily. I am very privileged, I would say. I love Degreed as a customer. We've been their customer since 2019. We started with a pilot. And right before the pandemic, we got in there. So my role is to lead our enterprise learning solutions at Ford Motor Company. So most of you know that Ford is a pretty large company. We have about 116,000 hourly employees and about 86,000 salary, and along with 56,000 contractors. So this presentation in context can be used for a small, medium, or large company. So don't think that the things that I'm going to share with you are just for a large company of our scale, but there's some lessons learned in here that I think you can really benefit from. So I wanted to start out with, what is a learning ecosystem? A lot of people are very, familiar with, how they have it documented as an ecosystem, but a lot of people realize that even if you have it undocumented, you still have an ecosystem in your organization. What you want to do is include all of your learning platforms, your technology. You want to include your logical and physical environment, but you also want to make sure it's dynamic, that it is changeable and it's adjustable. We want to be very intentional in our design of our ecosystem, and it's mostly illustrated through process flows and diagrams. So you'll notice here on this image here that this is a very similar ecosystem that a lot of individuals use. And it really reflects their LMS, their LXP, their LCMS, as well as their content libraries. One thing I want to point out here is very learner-centric. A lot of people think it's very technology-driven, but it should really focus on the learner. What are the experiences you want your learner to have, and how are you going to shape your ecosystem around that? So it's very intentional around your learning strategy, as well as your business needs. So what is the rationale for designing and documenting your ecosystem? I had, about a year and a half ago, I had an executive come to me at our company, and we had not documented our ecosystem. As large of a company as we are, as much as we invest in our content libraries and our LXP and our LMS and our LCMS, we had not documented it before I came into this role. And he says, we're spending a lot of money on our ecosystem, What happens if it changes or I throw a HCMS in there? How will that impact all the other dynamics? And we all know how systems work. A change in one has an impact on the whole system in itself. So I started to look at our ecosystem and went back to him. I says, let's come up with some kind of an image or a diagram to be able to show how this integration happens. Now, a lot of people in IT want to use architecture diagrams. People use flow charts. Keep it simple is one of the things that I would say because your business is going to want to have an input into this ecosystem. But in documenting it, what I learned is that it exposes your gaps in your learning technology strategy. And I'm going to show you how our learning strategy before is very evident in how it supports our technology strategy. But one of the reasons or rationale for documenting is that it really exposes where your gaps are in your learning strategy and in your technologies. So if you want to do augmented and virtual reality, where do you start there? Who is the audience? That goes back to your learning strategy. Then it's a collective view of your L&D strategy. So your ecosystem should hinge off of your L&D strategy. There should not be a disconnect between what your strategy is for learning. If you're going to offer strategy in certain markets, how is your ecosystem going to support that? You should also be able to prioritize employee development. This goes back to a learner-centric view of your technology platforms. This is where your learning strategy comes in around how you're going to be able to support your learners' engagement, their employee development. And now we're shifting internally from just an LMS to a HCMS, a human capital management system. That is really causing our ecosystem, I call unbalance right now. How are we going to do skills? Is skills going to be in degree or is it going to be in our HCM? How are we going to do employee development? Is that going to be driven through recruitment, onboarding, talent management, and learning? So you see how all of this now starts to shape into one cohesive system where you're really addressing how you're going to onboard people in their learning needs, how you're going to retain them, and how you're going to develop them over the life cycle while they're in their career at your company. Then create this transparency and alignment. This is a very critical one. This alignment needs to happen throughout all of your ecosystem in your business units. We have over 15 business units in Ford, and they're very decentralized in their own categories, and they have their own funding. How do we support them from an enterprise view with funding and ensure that they have the resources that they need for their leadership team members as well as their hourly and other employees? And also, you see it as a strategic investment. So for so long, learning has not been at the strategic forefront. Because of the pandemic, it gave us a gift. Now we get money, but how do you know where you need to invest that money? And that's where you build an ecosystem to be able to identify that. So I'm going to give you this case study about Ford's journey. Some of our guiding principles are around offering learning for anyone, anytime, anywhere. And our notion is that employees are the owners of their learning. They guide their learning development. We offer those solutions to them, but they become that conduit for where they get access to it and how they learn on their own. This is a representation of Ford's learning ecosystem. And I have to caveat this because behind this is certain assumptions as well as open issues that we have within our ecosystem. This is just the components of the ecosystem. There is a visual diagram that's very complex about our ecosystems and how they support one another. I just wanted to give you a very short kind of snap view of this with our infrastructure and our learning providers. So if we look in that first column, we'll look at our infrastructure. We have our LXP, which is degreed, which is our front door access to learning. Then we have our LMS, our learning management system, which is SABA. And we're transitioning to an HCM, as I mentioned before, and we're looking at how that kind of supports our ecosystem too. But at the moment, this is our current view. The LMS supports our formal learning, it captures our compliance training, and also does our history and tracking. Then we have our LCMS. I'm not sure how many individuals have a learning content management system. And ours is through Xylene. And I am very, very fortunate that we do have our learning LCMS. We can reuse content. It has great analytics. We have a reusable template that our designers can use. It gives consistency in uploading SCORM compliant to our LMS. You'll notice in that next column, we have learning content providers. We'll degree to source through our skill content providers. We have LinkedIn Learning, we have Pluralsight, Coursera, Udemy, Udacity. Not all of these are enterprise license funded. Only a segment of them. Right now, we have LinkedIn Learning, which is primarily our content source for across the board for enterprise. And when I say enterprise, that means that anyone in a salary or hourly position has access to that. I'm of the notion that you don't have a license for everyone. Not everybody gets a car like Oprah has. You get a car, you get a car, you get a car. No, everybody doesn't get a license. You get a license based on your need and your skill development and acquisition. That helps drive towards you owning your career based on your needs and the content providers we offer you. Then we have our custom development through our authoring tools. Right now we have Camtasia and Captivate. We use Articulate, but it's very clunky with Saba and the interface, so in SCORM compliance. So we have some issues there, but those are our standards right now, and we're looking at expanding those. And then, of course, I mentioned our learning content management system. It has an authoring tool component with it also that we utilize. So let's look at some challenges and insights. When I started to look at our ecosystem, one thing that really I had a challenge with is this access for all. I think this was a mindset in our culture that everyone was entitled to access to this catalog, and whatever they needed, they went in and they got. Well, how do you kind of do that globally for a company our size? Because we could run into million. When I did an estimation, it came out to $6.2 million to kind of source our funding for just content providers, not for the LXP, the LMS, and the LCMS. That's a lot of money for content providers. So what we did was we started looking at it from a skills perspective, and also we start to look at having a relationship with our vendors. What do you specialize in? Pluralsight and Coursera has a lot more around data analytics, around more technical skills. So that would be for my more technical team members and partners. Next, one of our challenges was looking at this cohesive integration. How do you make sure you integrate across the platforms with each and don't create silos? This is where you look at it from a now, near, far view and a strategy. How your ecosystems fit together in 6 months, how they're going to fit together in a year, and how they're going to fit together in 3 years or 5 years. And you have a plan for that. The next one is data management. How do we make sure that there's a cohesive view of data in our ecosystem? This is where we've created a self-serve approach to our data and analytics. We call it democratizing data. This is where we make sure that people have access to a dashboard. They can pull data out about all of our content libraries and our LMS, as well as our LXP and degree. And the evolution of technology. To me, this is the most critical one. Change is going to occur in the ecosystem, and how you manage that is through engagement with your vendors and making them your partners. So I'm going to wrap up here on some summary points. Shape your ecosystem around a now, near, far view. Don't have just a short-sighted view of your ecosystem. Make sure it's set for the long term. Talk to your business partners. Talk to the C-suite. Let them know how this integrates together, how it works, but don't get too technical. Keep it at a high level what the learner experience should be and what you're aiming for in your L&D strategy. You want to build access by need and by skill acquisition. You want to explore various viewpoints as you create your ecosystem, IT, learning, talent management. All of those are core business enablers to supporting your ecosystem. You want to create this self-serve approach to democratizing data, and you want to build those external partnerships with other companies. I found that very valuable when developing your ecosystem. Talk to other companies, small, medium, and large. See what they're doing, how they're building their ecosystem. Gain lessons learned from them and evolve your ecosystem. So with that in mind, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, I I absolutely love how like I'm hearing your voice everywhere, right? So I'm thinking how it it really resonates with what you were speaking. It's like a surround sound system, and it's a surround sound ecosystem of what you have. So absolutely, you're truly setting up your learners for success. Absolutely amazing.
Yes.
Questions from the audience, please. Yes. They'll pass you a mic. Yeah.
Thank you. That was really insightful. I wanted to follow up on content provision or content platform provision because your numbers are astounding. We just passed 1,000 employees, and I'm very challenged by this. Do you do it at the department level, division level, team level? Like, how granular do you get when you're trying to match the employee with the content platform that you're providing them? Thank you.
So, one thing that I really like about Degreed is it has the AI engine that supports your skills and where your gaps are. You come out with those 5 focus skills as an employee. We have sources into that says, okay, you have a gap in this area. This is the content provider that we're going to link up with you to be able to fill that source. This is where we're starting to really use the technology to help drive that skill development. And I think a lot of things that we're going to see in our HCM is going to help us do that too and facilitate that. So that's kind of how we're partnering with the content providers. I think having a good relationship with your content providers, we went through volume discounting with a lot of our providers. I really went back and looked at all of our contracts and started to really look at what do we need versus what do we want and how we could source those contracts based on our volume discounts. And that's where I found the partnerships help too, with being able to identify the right source for the right skills for your employees' needs. And the AI engine helps drive that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah.
Hi, quick question. So, with talking about democratizing learning, if you have an individual that sits in one department that may not fit the criteria for having access to more technical, like if I sit in HR and I want to be an engineer and they don't necessarily have access to Pluralsight because Pluralsight's expensive, how do if my goal is to be an engineer and I don't have access to it, how do you solve for democratizing that learning for individuals who are interested in changing their career path?
Oh, that's a good question. We haven't got there yet. I believe that you do it through skills and really looking at mapping where people's career plans can go and having them map where they want to go in that journey. And then you set that path for them. They set the path for themselves on how they're going to get that journey and where they're going to go. That's a career development discussion that needs to happen with your manager. The systems part of that, I haven't worked out just yet. So we're still on a journey to evolve that because, Pluralsight and Coursera license are very expensive. And so now our data analytics, what we call GDIA, has access to Pluralsight. So I'm really big on experimenting. I always start small and then experiment. So we start with focus groups. Start them small, then grow them and grow them. And then after a while, you've got the synergy energy where everybody's pushing up to senior leadership. We really need this. So if that's where you're going to start and that's where your development is for employees, for them to be able to have a career path, and the content libraries are going to facilitate that, that's where the experimentation, and we've done that with Coursera and Pluralsight and Udemy now with experimentations and how people cross over those skills. Because that's going to be very important for our hourly going forward. We're not going to always, if we want to make this transition to electric vehicles, we're not going to be always have people on a line in a production assembly. And we're going to have to be able to shape those skills. And that's been a reoccurring theme I've heard at the conference too.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to pass this on to Emily. We're going to transition over on the topic of Great Resignation, which is happening right now to everyone, a little bit more on skills and how that moves along with career mobility and career growth. Emily.
Thank you. Thank you, Elaine. Hi, my name is Emily Wagner, and I am a People Development Manager at Code 42, which is an insider risk management and software security company located in frigid Minneapolis, Minnesota, where Dave is from, where it's going to snow tonight. So we're very happy to be here. Yeah. All right. So we're going to get vulnerable. I'm going to start with the Great Resignation, which was a term coined in 2019 by organizational psychologist Dr. Anthony Klott. And he predicted the mass voluntary exodus of the workforce, and then it happened. That's my movie voice. And then it happened. In 2021, Microsoft's Work Trend Index said that 41% of the workforce was considering leaving their place of employment. We all know in April, 4 million people left, and then again in August, 4.3 million people left, a new high. We're all now very familiar with the concept. So the question is, how do we combat the Great Resignation? So research sources point to management. Gallup says they had a poll and they said it takes a 20% pay increase to lure employees away from a manager that they feel supports them, that they trust. And it takes next to nothing to poach them. So we upskill managers. Number 2, 66% of US employees are actively not engaged or actively disengaged. And so we have to think of strategies on how to give employees this feeling of worthiness, this feeling of accomplishment. And finally, in a recent Medium article I read, people would prefer to work in beds rather than in workstations. You got me. We cannot solve for everything. We can solve for the first two. So we'll start with the management piece. All right. It was super hilarious. It's a great article. All right. So Code 42 had a manager toolkit. This is where I start talking about mistakes. This is where I get vulnerable with you. And we created it in an HR vacuum. I see some nods. You understand me. This doesn't work. And so we, in our quest, we had this novel idea. Let's ask managers what they need. And so we interviewed high-performing managers and new managers, and we asked them, what do you know, but what do you need to know? What do you want to know? And surprisingly, actually, it's probably not surprising because you're L&D folk, but surprisingly, a good portion of what they wanted already existed. And so we had it in the wrong place. So our second mistake was we built it inside our firewall where it wasn't easily accessible, and we rectified that by creating this manager toolkit. It's a Google site, and 2 of the elements, the pencil element, the point in time element, get it? Pencil. Okay, so that had events, things like hiring, parental leave. And then we had that technical tools training, that is that flower pot and the tools. And so that's your applications and your technical tool upskilling. But then we had 2 new sections. That fundamental sections, that 101 section is the general management concepts. And so these were micro-learnings in Degreed, pathways in Degreed. And they had concepts like, how do you recognize your employees? How do you become a security role model as a manager? Remember, we're a cybersecurity company. How do you move from friend to manager? These are real problems. How do you have successful one-on-ones? How do you effectively communicate with your team? And number 2, which is my favorite section, is the manager resources, the 201, more like leadership development courses. And so again, each element was curated and degreed with pathways or micro-learnings. And so you click on that submarine section, that building effective team sections, and you have micro-learnings in unconscious bias, gender identity, transgender issues, how to create psychological safety, how to be an inclusive leader, and how to build inclusive teams. You scroll down, click on that leadership airplane section, and you get micro-learnings in strategic leadership, business ethics, collaborative leadership. All right, so here's another mistake we were making. We were abiding by the golden rule rather than the platinum rule. So the golden rule is, do unto others as you would have done unto you. And the platinum rule is, do unto others as they would have done unto them. Now, people watch TEDx videos in their free time. And I guarantee you, no one binges on my LMS content at 8 p.m. at night. Nobody does. And so what we did was we embedded the TED at Work pathways into this section. So we have Simon Sinek's How Great Leaders Inspire Action in there, among others. So now we're giving them the content that really speaks to them. So again, 21 sections, micro-learning, self-paced, self-directed, just in time, from communication, conflict and coaching, the 3 C's, to return to office, virtual workplace, virtual team building, and trust and wellness. All right, moving on to engagement. So this next section, we are going to start thinking outside of the box That was the mistake we were making, not thinking outside of the box in terms of engagement. And so the second approach I'm going to talk about starts with a Japanese concept that was career changing for me 3 years ago. Ikigai. Ikigai is a Japanese concept and is loosely translated into a reason for being. It marries your passion, your mission, your vocation, your profession in this beautiful Venn diagram. And you see those offshoots? That's disengagement. That is dissatisfaction. So here's my story. 3 years ago, I was a QA manager at Code 42 in the engineering team, and I was missing what the world needs, that area in pink, what the company needed. In 2019, we were embedding QA analysts into the engineering teams, and I felt redundant. And I saw the writing on the wall. Fast forward 2 years, my counterparts were let go. And so I had to think about what I was good at, what my skills were. I had to think about what Code 42 needed, what the world needed. And so to find my ikigai, which, spoiler alert, is L&D, I needed a new process. Transferable skills for career mobility. Basic 4-step process that I will talk you through, which talks about ways to identify skills and transfer people internally in your company before they look externally first. So the first thing an employee would do is think about, what am I good at? What skills do I have? Now, here's another mistake we made. We sent out skills surveys to managers and we said, what skills do your employees need? And they dutifully answered our skills surveys and they sent them back to us. And then they took no serious action in developing those skills with their employees, even after we spent our time curating content specifically for the skills that they said that they needed. So the mistake number one that we made was asking managers to pick skills without getting the why behind why they needed those skills. So here are some avant-garde approaches. The Year Compass. It is a free PDF. Now, Stedman Graham was just talking about vision and being intentional. This it's not an assessment, it's a PDF. It asks you questions like, what are you proud of? Where do you get your energy from? Where are you your bravest? This exercise correlates what you love to do and what you want to do to skills. When I was in QA 3 years ago, I took this Year Compass, and what I identified, my skills were coaching, data analytics, product management, and critical thinking. And those all correlated into L&D, so I made the switch. Number two, in another exercise was laid out by Lindsay Pollack in her recent book, Recalculating. How many of you do not have a social media account? No social media accounts. No LinkedIn, nobody? You all do? Yeah, me too. So she says her suggestion is pay special attention to what you are jealous of. So that's a mistake that we're making. We're not asking the real questions. We're not having those real conversations. When there is an element on somebody's profile that you are especially jealous of, that is a flashing neon sign that is an important element of what you want for yourself. Her suggestion is to find those people and find those skills that you admire and make that a roadmap for action. True story, my colleague, we will call her Lisa Smorgasborg, that is not her real name. Lisa Smorgasborg was posting on LinkedIn about speaking at conferences and about her new blog. And on LinkedIn, I was all like, great job, Lisa, awesome. And like internally, I was all like, Lisa Smorgasborg, blah, 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 blah. So to combat that, here I am. Woo! Thank you, I needed that. So here I am, and I'm also posting on Medium. So I'm stretching my skills. And why that's happening is because I am having these real, authentic conversations with my manager, my boss, Kathleen. And when you do that, you get creativity and you get these stretch assignments. People get to stretch themselves. Number 3, Strength Finders, DISC, Enneagram, MBTI. You have these assessments? Yeah, we did too. And we used them for one day in a team building exercise. And then we never used it again. So that's a mistake that we're making. We're not ideating on how we could use these assessments for the skills journey, because assessments lay out your natural priorities, which are skills. All right, so in DISC, that's the assessment that we use. My natural priorities are optimism and enthusiasm, driving results, collaboration. Strength finders, your strengths are the skills that you leverage. I'm a futurist, I have the skill of innovation. Anybody a woo out there? Oh, I want to be a woo so bad. Not a woo, but woo has the strength of connection. Now, connection boils down to the skills of emotional intelligence, collaboration, negotiation. So at Code 42, we've started developing these team effectiveness trainings, instructor-led trainings in building great teams, productive conflicts, individual contributor to leadership programs, and they have the DISC assessment, and they also have the skills. We build the skills right into the degreed plan. All right, next is the business's turn. We need to have a roadmap for career mobility. So a mistake that is made a lot, and I've been hearing this resonating throughout the conference thus far, is having a rigid career framework where you can only move up the ladder and you can't move across the ladder, like I did. So yes, you need job titles. Yes, you need job descriptions. Yes, you need job levels, but you also need skills. And then you need to be transparent. We needed to be transparent about the process for how to internally transfer, how to get promoted, and celebrate that so people can see that it's real and it's actually happening. If you have a platform with career mobility built into it, like Degreed, then that effortlessly takes your opportunities to your employees. But if you do not, then we need to showcase those requisitions to the employees via Slack, via email. Another story, again, protecting the innocent and making up the names. But Jim saw that Adam, who was a project manager, hired externally for a PM role. And Jim got really upset. I've been working really hard. Nobody recognizes me. How come they didn't present this opportunity to me? I'd be really great at it. And he left. And he's disgruntled with the company and left on bad terms. But that all could have been avoided if we were pushing those job requisitions, if we were making that transparent so that he would have had that opportunity to interview. All right, now L&D. We need to get learners the skills that they need. So the mistake that we're not making, and Marsha totally set me up with the ball, is ecosystems. The mistake that we're making is not leaning into those integrations. So she talked about the Ford ecosystem. I'm going to double down on that. We have digital learning platforms, LinkedIn Learning, Pluralsight, O'Reilly, DataCamp, Udemy, which is outside, Coursera. I talked about TED at Work. Code 42 just released security training called Instructor 42. We cannot curate everything. Digital learning platforms are needed for specific skills that are not scalable. So when you're a small company like me, like Code 42, the mistake that you make is curating everything. Let's lean into those ecosystems. Our final mistake, not measuring success and not showing return on investment to the company. So this is what we're doing now. We're looking at the data and giving executives the analytics on how L&D contributes to exit rates, to internal transfers, to promotions. We're talking to the HR and the people team, and we're looking at the learning engagement scores year over year, not general engagement scores, specifically the learning engagement scores. For the L&D team, for the learning and development team, Degreed makes that super simple by giving us trackable links, insights, skill ratings, and helping us understand the types of content that is being consumed and what skills are trending for foresight into the future. And finally, the business and the departments, now we're feeding them information so that they know which learning efforts are making an impact on quality, on velocity, which learning efforts are making an impact and upskilling, and which learning efforts need to be eliminated. And that is all. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Back to you, Elaine.
Thank you. Emily, I have a secret.
What?
I really want to stalk this Lisa Smorgasburg as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll give you a real name later.
Talk about transferable skills. I absolutely love the usage of the Ikigai principle and to reposition what your company needs versus what they're good at.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. I think I'm going to apply that to my career as well. Any questions from the audience? We could take one or two questions. Yes.
All right, Emily. Yeah. I just also want to say that Lisa Schmorgasburg has nothing on you.
Aw.
So, you know.
Thank you, Sonda.
I was interested in hearing more about the manager toolkit. What was the impact and the outcome after you rolled that out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we rolled it out 3.5 months ago. I'd be a little preemptive to say like it changed the world, but we're seeing less requests to the people business partners for information that is readily available that they needed because now they know kind of where to go. And also it's building that relationship with us. So with the learning team. I was talking to Nick, I don't know if he's in this session, but he was in my session yesterday and he was talking about learning and development teams only being compliance training. And so when you're seen as only a compliance training company, there's some antagonistic feelings like, oh, you're just compliance, you never give us what you need. What do you do in L&D anyways? You're not upskilling. But when they see us asking them the questions, inviting them, collaborating with them, then all of a sudden we're more these learning business partners. So that's been improving too.
Can't wait to see more of that data coming.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the audience?
To expand on the toolkit a little more, you said you opened it up to outside of your network?
No, so the manager toolkit is on a Google site, but it's still internal to the Code 42 infrastructure.
Okay.
It's just not behind our firewall, which meant that nobody could go to it on their phone and they'd have to VPN in to get to it. And yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I was going to ask how you fought the battle to be able to open that up, but I understand now, like just one step back.
Still protected, but
Awesome. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Emily. So we're gonna switch gears, pun not intended, and you'll see why. To Dave Harrison, he's gonna speak a little bit. He's actually going to hone in on the content strategy, speak a little bit more about content strategy and governance. So Dave, over to you.
Thank you. So when you're implementing a brand new system that's intended to change the way your organization looks at learning, develops their skills, builds new learning experiences, it can feel overwhelming, like a no-win situation, like you're trying to save the galaxy. And really, I think the biggest thing that you can do to combat that, I think, is content strategy. And so I'm here to talk a bit about content strategy and why it's important to your overall organizational structure and your rollout plan. So I'm going to start with a quote from the author of Content Strategy for the Web. Has anybody heard of that book? It was written by Christina Halverson. She's my sister. just gonna put it out there, but she is one of the leading minds in content strategy for the web. And she defines content strategy as the creation, delivery, and governance of useful and usable content. And really, it guides, it means getting the right content to the right people at the right time. And so that absolutely applies to what we are doing with Degreed, obviously. It's something that I have applied not just because she's my sister, but also it's part of my work. And our conversations at holiday meals are super, super interesting, at least to the two of us. So I'm going to spend a few minutes sharing some lessons learned from my experience in implementing Degreed. I'm actually on my second implementation. I enjoyed a career at Ameriprise Financial in Minneapolis, and we rolled out Degreed there. And I've just recently joined Medtronic, also in Minneapolis, and we just launched last Monday to 100,000 people.
Woo.
So pretty exciting, pretty overwhelming. It's kind of like Luke and Leia and C-3PO and R2-D2 looking out into the galaxy, wondering what's next at the end of Empire Strikes Back. So really, I think one of the biggest things when you think about content strategy is that it doesn't start with creation. A good content strategy starts with figuring out your governance. And so at the helm of that, this is one of the first things that I feel like is a lesson learned for me. Assemble your team. And I'm not talking about hiring 10 more people. I'm talking about what can you do to make sure that you understand what you need to have a successful implementation. That's from the administrative side, curation side, who's going to be curating your content. Comms and marketing, they are going to be critical partners to you as you roll this out. It's critical they understand what you're trying to do. Support, who's going to support the thing when it's out and people call with questions or challenges. Partners and champions, who are the people that are cheering you on across the organization? I feel like that was a big opportunity in my previous role as well, is really not only finding those champions and making sure they were equipped to sing it from the rooftops, but also finding the challengers as well and bringing them in and saying, you know, what can we do to better help you get on board or help you understand what we're trying to do? And so that's another one. Leaders and stakeholders, it's critical. This is one of the most critical things, I think. Make sure that they have their story down. So when you have leaders supporting your efforts, you want to make sure you're confident with them going into meetings, talking about the platform, that A, they're speaking confidently, B, they're describing the platform accurately, and C, they're not making any promises that you can't keep as the admin or manager of the platform. So it's really, really critical there. This next one, we talked about it earlier. Guess what? They don't do it really as well. I know because I've tried. So it's critical to say, all right, these are the systems in our ecosystem. This is what Degree does well, and establish that value proposition in an easy to remember and easy to repeat phrase. What we are saying at Medtronic is we've called it Skills Lab. And our tagline is build the skills that matter most to you in your career. It's very clearly defining that it is you driven. It's not corporate compliance driven. Really, really critical to get that right. Easy to remember guiding principles, such as, you know, when you sit down with your content curators and your pathway builders, what's the right length of time for a pathway? You know, Degree tends to recommend 30 to 45 minutes. That may be different for your organization. Structure, make it easy for them to remember what makes a good pathway. And one that we kind of latched onto was tell, show, do, review. Yesterday we heard a speaker, Ollie, and he had, I think, the 5 Ps or something like that. And they were rooted in the same structure as that is. But that's just kind of rolls off your tongue. It's easy to repeat. It's easy for folks to remember when they go to build pathways. This next one is hard for instructional designers and new curators to get their heads around. Yeah, the content is free on the web. Yeah, I can go and find it and send an email and share it. Check that fair use on those sites, especially if you're building pathways or plans. Make sure that you're not going to put yourself or your company in harm's way by improperly using content. So those are just a few. One other one. This is a bit of a soapbox thing for me, I guess. Have you all in your implementation used the term one-stop shop in selling Degreed or talking about Degreed? Mm-hmm. Yes? It's okay. We're vulnerable. This is a vulnerable session. What happens when you click on an item in a pathway? Right. I strongly request and urge you to remove the word one-stop shop from your vocabulary. These ecosystems are complex. We don't want to oversell something. It's one of those things that I'm on a crusade to help address. So other ones that we are using internally on our team are walk the walk. So if we're not using the platform, how can we ask anyone else to use it? That was something that we really focused in on both at Ameriprise and now at Medtronic. We want to be walking the walk. And then similar to guiding principles, but more so in the day-to-day, document and share those best practices. Degreed has a wealth of information out on the Knowledge Center that we start with, and then we'll create versions of that for our organization. And then make sure that you're following organization requirements for translation, accessibility, review and approval. I know that's different for everyone, but it's critically important that that is part of your overall content strategy. And then this is a big lesson learned, and my friends at Ameriprise will nod vigorously at this. When we launched at Ameriprise, we attached it to one of the biggest changes in client expectation and client experience that the company had ever seen. And so we were like, yeah, we're gonna get a lot of logins, we're gonna get a lot of views and a lot of completions because this is a big initiative, big organizational change. Change on change is never great, right? And so with the organization so clearly focused on the Ameriprise client experience, Degreed, A, took a back seat, and B, caused a little bit more confusion because people's capacity for change was kind of at the limit. And so starting small, and that's actually what we're doing at Medtronic. We're starting small with content offerings, and then just set the expectation over time that you're going to iterate with new offerings, new integrations, those kinds of things. And then this last one, create and manage a curation or content calendar. That's a critically important one as well, so you know what's going to be shipping and when it's going to be shipping to your audiences. Consider a programmatic approach where you're really focusing your launches on programs, not necessarily as a full-on new platform, and then look at the data from those program points of view. This next one, process and tools is also critically important. So as you are talking about, we've heard about this a lot, democratizing design and curation. We've heard about this week. Letting go of that control of the build from a person who has managed lots of platforms, that's super scary to let that control go. You start to think about messy libraries, broken links, inaccurate content, poorly designed pathways. You start to think about all these things. So if you're going to democratize design and curation, it's critical that your team knows what's important from a design and curation standpoint. So make sure that you're providing them with reusable tools. We talked a little bit about that, and templates to get them started. So Degreed also offers templates and tools to plan pathways and build pathways out. It's a great starting point. And then be clear about the user experience. This is sort of my guiding principle about thinking like web designers. What do you want the user to do? What should they do when they get into the platform, when they experience your pathway? What happens after they experience your pathway? All of those things are really important as you build out those process and tools. Optimize search. I was so glad to hear Dan talk about search in the last session. This is something that's a challenge, especially for learning teams who aren't used to metadata and tagging and all those kinds of things. Help them understand how to get their content found and consumed and shared. Tagging, Degreed has a very complex algorithm when it comes to search, so I'm not going to spend time explaining that because I'm not sure I understand all of it. But titles, descriptions, skills, all of those feed into the search experience. And then look for the bright spots. So I have a news flash, your problems are not unique. And that sounds harsh, but what I mean by that is that others have had the problem and solved the problem. We've advocated pretty strongly in Minneapolis for a local user community because we have a lot of big companies that are using Degreed. And so we'll get together every now and then. We haven't lately, but to really share ideas, overcome challenges together, those kinds of things. Look for other organizations or other folks within your company that are doing well at the things you're struggling with. And the last one, ongoing creation and maintenance. And so pathway and plan maintenance, making sure you have a plan for that over time. Who's building the pathways, but then who's maintaining them over time. That led to the creation of a bot, we call it a bot affectionately, that automatically crawls our internal Degreed catalog, as well as pathways and plans to root out broken links. Our pathway owners were spending a lot of time, I'm looking at Nancy, we're spending a lot of time looking for those broken links in their pathways. This solved for that and bought them all that time back to be able to focus on the things that are more important. Automate workflows. So intake, issue tracking, anything that you feel like you're just slodging on and doing over and over, look for ways to automate there. Business rules, Degreed has a great business rule engine. You just got to be real clear about your requirements and how to do it. Reports and dashboards, we worked on getting degree data into our data lake at Ameriprise, and we're working on doing the same at Medtronic. And then archiving when stuff is out of date. I talked about user groups, both internally and externally. Internal user groups have been very, very helpful in not only helping people understand how to use the tool, but also understanding what's coming up next, share ideas and challenges so that we can share them back with Degreed. And Degreed's been an amazing partner to hear those challenges and address them and make changes accordingly. And then I like this one too, use data to make future content decisions. What are people searching for? What are people sharing with their organizations, whether it's within the groups, within Degreed, or just individually? What's not getting used? Like, is it something that needs to be revamped, or is it something that needs to be updated or more heavily communicated? So those are some of the lessons learned that I've had in my experience with Degreed. So I really challenge you to dive into your content strategy and your governance approach right away, early on, and often. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. I really love some of these call outs on the best practices around user expectation, user experience, but also just democratizing curation, right? It's a bold move, I think, for a lot of our clients, and it takes time, it takes patience, and really most importantly, just trust. Trust in your curators, trust in your learners to be able to provide something useful and a coherent pathway for the rest of your learners. So these are great tips and tricks. Thank you. We'll take some questions from the audience.
Hey, thank you for the conversation. The one thing that really jumps out to me is the automation, the bots, to crawl the content.
Yes.
Just love to maybe pull the thread on that a little bit more. How did you go about doing that? What was the idea generation, and how is it working?
Sure. It's totally magic. No. Yeah, exactly. The force, right?
That's the code.
So we actually, it was an idea that was generated from one of our leaders, as a matter of fact, and we actually engaged with our process automation team. There was a team that actually uses this tool called Pega, and I don't know what it's called, or I don't know what it stands for, but that's the name of the tool. And they're able to create automation for these types of things. And so we sat down with them, wrote out our requirements, both business and technical, and we said we'd like it to run weekly. We don't think anything more frequent than that makes a lot of sense. And we needed to tell us, which links are broken, both in our catalog and our pathways and plans. And so every week we would drop our file, our daily FTP file, in a shared location. This part needs to be automated. So this was like our first stab at it, and I think eventually that will be automated as well. But then the bot runs on it every Saturday night, I think, and we get a report back on Monday that we're able to run, and then send out to pathway owners and content owners and say, hey, is this still valid? You need to update this. So not only is it saving time for the owners, but it's also reducing calls, support calls, those kinds of things. One thing I didn't mention as well, and I think this is paramount, every login to Degreed is a chance for us to build trust with our users. Every broken link, every bad search is broken trust. And so we have to be diligent as platform owners and stewards of the platform to build that trust and maintain it over time. And so that was what we were trying to do here, was build that trust, make sure that the experience is good, and also optimize the process. So it's working well. I think the first one found like 80 broken links or more. Now over time, that's less because we're keeping on top of it in a more efficient way. Hope that helps. Great.
Can I just add, what is the time frame that you're giving to the curators to go through the links?
I don't know that there was ever a
It's like a monthly
time
basis.
frame.
No? Nothing.
So we would communicate it out like on a weekly basis, and expect that they would get to it soonish.
Great
Yeah.
trust.
And you know what I want to add to that? That's one of our biggest challenges with our user groups. And you are absolutely right about the trust. When I pull a report in from the Zendesk that the Greed has, one of them is broken links. And it's amazing because we'll have China come in and say, I can't get to this pathway or plan. And then they're like, forget it. I won't go in and complete, the pathway plan. So I think that's a tremendous idea that you have to do that.
Got to patent it.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
No.
Yes, you do.
No, but it's worked really well, and we plan to implement it at Medtronic as well.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll talk. Yeah.
I was curious, who are you opening up to be your content curators and your pathway designers?
Great question. I'm still learning the ropes. I'm 5 weeks into Medtronic, and so large launch presentation at the conference. Nothing like jumping into the fire, right? So I'm still learning the organization, but it's a very large matrix organization with a lot of different learning teams, and so we're starting with the learning teams. And Patrick Marchand from Degreed has actually been leading curation sessions for those folks. We've already had 2 of them where it's very much experiential, where they go through and understand it. And we had this at Ameriprise too. It was a certification process where they go through it and they actually build their first pathway and plan, and then they come back together and they teach back or they talk about it, present it, and it's worked pretty well. And so right now the focus is on the learning teams, and eventually I think there will be some businesses that will be supporting it as well, especially in our global markets. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for all of your contributions here. These ecosystems and discoverability seems so built into it and works so well. I'm wondering how all of you think about tapping into intrinsic motivation or encouraging employees and learners to tap into that to figure out what to search for.
Is that for all of us? Yeah. Okay. I can start. So my new role at Medtronic is for change and adoption and driving technology adoption. And I've thought about that because people are busy. And so helping them understand they have this new resource and the expectation is that they are focusing on building their own skills is a tough sell sometimes. And so we are trying to position Degreed as you are going to need new skills. You probably have acquired new skills in the last couple of years and you just didn't realize it. We are going to give you 2 things. We are going to give you the space with your leader to determine which skills you want to focus on. We're going to give you a platform to be able to track it, and we're going to give you the best content to support it. And so that's kind of how we're positioning it. The other thing that I love about how Medtronic is positioning skills in the organization is they have a whole skills strategy that includes things like removing the degree requirement from certain roles that no longer really require it, focusing more on skills. We realize we're missing out on a lot of talent that way. And they're bringing in, I'll be honest, this is another ecosystem thing, but they're bringing in another system to help with talent acquisition in that realm. They also tout skills. And so we got to figure out what's the source of truth, where are our users entering it, what's going to make them motivated, like you said, to go back to it. And so we don't have it all figured out yet, but that's how we're trying to position it.
I would like to yes and that. So yes, exactly what Dave said. And the whole concept of giving people permission to say that it is okay to intrinsically learn, to market to them and say this is available to you and also you can learn. At Code 42, we have Thinking Thursdays. On Thursdays, there's a block of time from 9 a.m. Central to 1 p.m. Central, wherever you are in the world, and you are allowed to either get work done, no meetings, but also learn. And it's encouraged from an executive down that this is learning time. And so giving that, and then, also the management piece, making sure that the managers are communicating, make sure that individual employees understand that they get to own their own career and that there are all kinds of opportunities so they don't feel stuck. So yes, and permission and marketing and executive buy-in and just the intrinsic motivation, knowing that there is mobility for them.
And one I want to add on to that, because those are really good, Emily and Dave, is learning in the flow of work. I know you've heard about that.
Yeah.
We have tried to make it where when you learn something, you go Google it. You don't sit through a formal class anymore and do 10 hours of a session. So what we tried to do is make learning more intrinsic to the work that you do. if you compare the task or the work that people do and learning
Yeah.
to it, you will see great returns. Now, the challenge is that management always wants to measure informal learning. So you get into this thing of how are you going to measure those type of things when you start to do learning the flow of work. But that has worked well with us to try to, especially the hourly population that I'm working with now and doing a pilot, is really getting it into the hands of them, letting them just go with it, see it as a tool, a performance support tool that supports their knowledge that they want to develop, and then add that as a benefit and a bonus to them in doing their job. I think if we have that kind of mindset, and that's a cultural mind shift too, because permission and ownership to learn, all of those things come with time, but learning in the flow of work is really pushing us towards, at Ford, that's what we're looking at more.
It's an absolute culture to embed.
Oh, it really is. I mean, people are like, we're going through this now where we're redoing our processes, and people are like, well, where's curriculum maps? And I'm like, we don't do curriculum maps. I'm like, where you been? One of the managers, I was like, she's like, when did you all get rid of that? She's our learning manager years ago. And I was like, we don't do that anymore. You know, we want people to be democratized in their learning. We want it to be a natural flow of how they work. So I think this is a lot around mindset, you know, and we have a lot, I don't know a lot of organizations, but we have a lot of L&D managers that have not been trained, per se, trained in learning. And so for them, it's been always, this is what I've done to get people in, this is what I continue to do, and I offer curriculums to do it. And now we're trying to shift that mindset of that L&D manager, and I think that's where it starts too, getting to the employees. The employees want it, and they're doing it. It's some things that L&D managers are that roadblock at times.
Absolutely.
So just to piggyback off of too quick.
One last question. Yeah.
Just a quick one. For each of you, I hear about democratizing data, which I think is fantastic. There's a great top-down approach. But as you think about from the content perspective, what is each of your position on user-generated content?
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Do you mean user-generated content from anybody at the company can generate a pathway? I like it. So one of the things that that we've done and other people have done are these hackathons. So you can't do governance with the entire company, but you can do a learning session for them to understand the absolute basics of these are the standards and this is how it's going to work. So that's something that you can do. You can also teach them how to clone pathways or give them pathways to clone so they have best practices. But once they start doing it, then they can understand the benefit of it. Right now we don't have learners publishing to the whole company, so it exists in the user base, so it exists in their plan. But if there's something that someone wants, we absolutely will promote it to the business, and we have done that. And then also having these learning guilds, like when people get good enough, let them do it if they prove it. So we have learning guilds where different people do onboarding for their particular departments. They're not in L&D. So I would yes that.
Become subject matter experts.
Yeah. With guidelines.
Guidance. Dave and Marcia, anything you'd like to share on that?
I think it's a journey. We have not turned that on for our SMEs to be able to curate content and create pathways. We want to start with our managers and reinforcing that in what they do and then sharing content with their communities and their direct reports. I think it's a step-by-step process to do that because we have such a large organization. And one of the first questions, I'm working with the UAW now for hourly pilot to get integrated into our plants. One of the first questions they asked me was, what content? How is it filtered? Who has access to this? I mean, it was all those about trust. And I think as you get the managers engaged and they start curating, then you start to open the doors for the next group and then the next group of SMEs. I am all for our SMEs curating content and getting there and doing the assessments. I think that's where the richness comes in, but you got to have a strong governance behind it too.
I'm all for it. Bottom line, I think, especially with user-generated videos, which Degreed supports and hosts, that's the only content that Degreed hosts. I love how easy it is, and I'm actually going to do a few for my team later today from the conference. Like, hey, I survived that presentation and whatever. But I think hearing from your peers about how they manage challenges, those kinds of things, much like we're doing here, absolutely there's a place for that. I think the ability to create my own personal plan probably will drive my own accountability.
Yeah.
And I would hope that my leader would help me drive my own accountability once I've shared it with them. So I'm all for it. I think I remember one time early on in our implementation, I was sitting across the table from an info security person. It was like, well, how do you know the content they're sharing isn't inappropriate? How do you know it's okay to share? And I was like, newsflash, they're already sharing it. Like email, whatever. I mean, social media, whatever. I mean, they're already doing it. And so that to me is a non-starter for that conversation. That's a yeah, but conversation. That's not a what if conversation. And so that's something that I'm trying to change with my own approach to things is let's talk about what if.
Yeah.
So yes, we'll deal with it if something inappropriate gets shared. We have ways to do that. But let's operate out of a position of trust.
Yeah.
You know what? When we first launched Degree, I had an incident that an inappropriate image appeared in my pathway. I was like, Degree was right on it. They got the filter there. They took it down. I mean, so they have a good filtration system in Degree that alerts us. And one of our L&D managers alerted me, and he sent me the picture, and I was like, how did they get in my pathway? Am I playing that image? And it was immediately taken down. So
Right.
that trust and that building those credibility over time with your SMEs is really crucial to that piece too, Dave, what you were saying.
Trust around content strategy and governance.
Yes.
I feel like we can talk about this topic all day. However, we are keeping you all from lunch. Well, thank you everyone for joining
you all.
us.
Yes,
Thank you to
thank
the
you.
panelists.